Okay. All right. So it is 12 o'clock. So I think we will get started since we indicated we would start at noon. And again, my name is Michael Connolly. I'm the Director of Finance and Operations. And John Bernard, the Superintendent of Schools, is here with me, joining us on the webinar today. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for participation. Great. So what I hope to do today and during the time we have today is I have about a 15 or 16 slide presentation that I'm going to kind of go through. It should take about 20 to 25 minutes to kind of walk through this presentation. I'll try to do that relatively quickly. And then I'm hoping to leave plenty of opportunity at the end of the presentation to either unmute your line. Right now, everyone's line should be muted. And then if you do have a question at the end, if you kind of use the raise your hand function, that would indicate to me that you have a question, and I'll unmute your line, and then we can kind of have that conversation. You can ask your question. You can also use the the chat or the question feature as well, and then maybe as we get into the presentation, as we go along, we'll try to get your questions answered. So I'm going to start the presentation. So the first slide essentially just breaks down some information about the funding sources of a school budget. And there's really no surprise when you look at the revenue sources sort of flowing into the school department that over 70% is from the local taxes. That is pretty common in school municipal budgets. The other major revenue sources would be our state aid. That's a Chapter 70 aid and unrestricted local government aid that flows into North Reading. That amount has been relatively fixed and flat. North Reading doesn't see huge increases from year to year in state aid. The other sources would be local receipts, which is, as you can see, is 9.3%. That also is a relatively flat revenue source. And then we also have our grants and our fees, so that we charge assessed fees for programs like athletic revolving, athletic program, extracurricular programs, full day kindergarten, preschool. And then we also receive several federal and state grants. So all these kind of work to come in and make up the sources of revenue that helps fund a school budget. I want to talk a little bit about the key budget priorities. School committee does vote budget goals on an annual basis, and these are kind of maybe the top 5 priorities as the school department work to develop the FY19 budget. It's always a priority by the school committee as well as the administration to maintain educationally sound class sizes and to monitor enrollment and make sure we're adjusting and changing our staffing on an annual basis to deal with changes in enrollment. So this budget certainly looks to do that. We also always want to look at our NRPS 2021 document, which is the district's educational strategic plan. So this has always been a major driver and a key priority of the school budget, and we'll talk a little bit more about that plan later, but that's obviously a major priority. The fiscal 2019 budget year would represent year 3 of what is a 5-year strategic plan. We always want to maintain our commitment to upkeep of school facilities. So we've worked very hard over the last few years to reallocate funding and make sure we're upkeeping our school facilities and have the proper preventative maintenance contracts and measures in place to address our school facilities. Another goal and priority in this budget cycle, as it has been in the past, although something that we have not been able to fund fully, is the restoration of school expense operating budgets. And that those are the discretionary instructional materials and textbook and instructional technology line items that are housed at the schools. And unfortunately, those have been level funded over a period of several years, if not reduced, to try to meet our budget guideline over the last several years. So we are looking at that as a top priority when we develop the fiscal 2019 budget. And then final priority here is, just as we always do, we want to develop a budget that is able to meet the needs of all students, and we want to collaborate with the town and the finance planning team to do so. The finance planning team, for those of you that don't know what that is, it's a committee that meets on a monthly basis, and it is essentially the chairs and vice chairs of all the major committees and boards within the community. The school committee, the board of selectmen, the finance committee, myself, and Mr. Bernard, the superintendent of schools, as well as the town administrator and town finance director. So it's a committee that has worked very well for a number of years in North Reading, that helps look at the big picture of the revenue and the fixed costs and what is available to fund both school and municipal town budgets. So we had 5 major budget drivers in fiscal 2019. Most of these are pretty common. They've been our budget drivers that we've really seen over the last number of years. The first is the contractual salary obligations. So it's not uncommon for a school budget for over 80% of the school budget to be made up of salaries. The school department has about close to 400 total employees between our support staff, our professional staff, our administrators, our custodians, our food service workers. So contractual salary obligations are always going to be a large budget driver in the school department budget. So we've certainly had to make those staffing adjustments to meet those contractual obligations, cost of living adjustments, cost of some step increases, and some lane movements of eligible staff. And the fiscal 2019 budget certainly has done that. The next driver is, as I mentioned earlier, is our strategic plan, known as NRPS 2021. In the FY19 budget, which you'll hear more of in a moment, there are 3.9 FTE positions, which total $248,508. And this plan certainly focuses on 3 major strategy areas to improve and enhance learning in North Reading. And it's one is teaching and learning strategy area, one is student support services, and the third is technology integration strategy areas. So we'll certainly hear more about these 3.9 FTE positions in greater detail a little bit later in the presentation. The third is our operational costs. Certainly the district has fixed cost increases operationally that have presented, in some cases, a challenge in recent years, and those are mainly maintenance costs in the area of kind of heating and cooling and HVAC, plumbing needs, boiler needs, landscaping and grounds needs, elevator testing, inspection, and maintenance needs. We now operate a wastewater treatment facility at the middle school and high school campus, as well as our utility costs for electricity and water. And our regular transportation contract for the 10 buses that we operate daily. So all these things increase on a regular basis due to inflation and so forth, and it requires us to adjust and budget accordingly, but certainly a big driver of the budget. The fourth one is the special education out of district costs, and we've certainly had to make some adjustments in our fiscal 2019 budget. District does anticipate that our number of students in out-of-district placements will stay relatively the same, if not, go down slightly in fiscal 2019. Currently, there's about 36 students being educated outside of the district. I think we project that number will stay around maybe 35 students in fiscal 2019. But we've certainly had increases in this line item due to in some cases, students changing placements and to better adequately meet their needs, and that has certainly attributed to some increased cost. In most cases, that costs have been costs we've felt this year that are carrying over into fiscal year 2019, but certainly it's a big part of the FY19 budget and part of the story and conversation as we look to fund a budget in 2019. The fifth driver here, certainly school expense budgets. I talked about it earlier as a priority. We are attempting to restore expense budgets on a pure pupil basis to all the schools and departments, and increase those instructional materials, textbooks, instructional technology line items to better bring in the supplies and equipment needed at each school and in each department. So that is a priority, and we've allocated some additional funds at each school to do so. We've also attempted to restore small capital and equipment line items, which have been eliminated over the last few years. So we're looking to add back a small line item and about $15,000 to help us address some small capital needs and repair needs and maintenance needs for items that don't necessarily qualify for the large capital definition that gets funded through the town and through the capital improvement planning committee process. So now that we look at the numbers, a lot of those drivers I just spoke to, you can kind of see those at play when you look at how these 5 major expense categories compare between what we're asking for in fiscal 2019 and what is being funded and what the changes are between this current year, fiscal 2018. So as you can see, the salaries, that change is 4.1%. That's certainly driven by our contractual salary obligations, as well as some additional positions, as I talked about, being driven by our strategic plan and RPS 2021. We have our instructional, expenses, and that's what's guiding that increase is certainly our attempt to restore those expense budgets and provide some small capital needs. And then you have the operations and maintenance needs. What's in this line item is a need that we felt to reallocate and increase some line items for the maintenance needs around HVAC, plumbing needs, boiler repair needs, as well as addressing increases to our utility costs, and contractual increases like the contract for the operator and engineer that we have with the wastewater treatment plant and so forth. So certainly all those contracts go up on an annual basis, as well as our utility needs. So that certainly line item needed to be addressed and adjusted as it does on an annual basis. Transportation, that increase is mainly the result of an increase to our regular bus transportation contract. Fiscal 19 would represent year 3 in that 3-year contract, and those rates are going up next year, so we've had to make an adjustment. The rate we get charged per bus per day on a daily basis for the 10 buses that we operate. And then perhaps the largest driver, as you can see, maybe perhaps the largest challenge that we're dealing with at the moment is this increase in our out-of-district tuition costs. You can see the amount going up in the percentage. And again, that's talks a lot about what I mentioned earlier. And we're also needing to shift more expenses to the operating budget because unfortunately the state reimbursement program known as Special Education Circuit Breaker has not been fully funded by the state. So if that program was fully funded, we'd be seeing a large level of reimbursement dollars flow into our account and into the school department this year as well as next year. But because the state has not been able to fully fund that program this year, and it doesn't seem like they potentially will be able to do that next year, we've had to make that adjustment. So a big part of that increase, a portion of that 25.8% increase is due to a loss of that additional offset that we are used to seeing in the special education reimbursement account. So this just kind of shows you a quick snapshot of those 5 expenses that I just discussed. And as I mentioned, salaries are over 82% of the budget. That's not uncommon. Most of these other categories and the breakdown of what makes up the school budget on the expense side of the equation have been relatively consistent. Again, the out-of-district tuition amount is going up almost by 1% from previous year. Some of these other percent breakdowns are relatively flat, and the salaries, it's been pretty common that we see that amount around 82 to 83%. Enrollment, I talked a little bit about enrollment in the opening, but enrollment is always a big part of the budget conversation. We do monitor our enrollment projections on an annual basis, and we look at changes amongst grade level, and we look at what's happening. And this chart shows you the yellow bar graph is where we're at currently, district-wide. This is pre-K through grade 12. We're a little over 2,490 students currently. And then this attempts to project out the next 10 years. So as you can see, we do project a slight decline in our total enrollment next year. And then, enrollment essentially is going to attempt to kind of level out around 2,450 students in the outer years. But when you look at, over 13 grades that are represented here, when you look at preschool through grade 12, having enrollment go down by about 39 or 40 students is not a significant amount and is not really representative of any major staffing changes. So the FY19 budget does not have any staffing reductions due to changes in enrollment, as well as any staffing additions. It may have some changes among certain grade levels based on the changes of students and the cohort of students moving amongst grade in schools, but this change is not significant enough to warrant major staffing changes due to enrollment. So I told you I would talk a little bit more about NRPS 2021 and our staffing needs. So we have included in the recommended budget a 3.9 FTE of new positions. This is amounts to $248,508, which is amongst our 5.3% total increase that we're asking, that is included in the recommended budget. This only accounts for about a 0.8% of that total 5.3% increase. So it's a relatively modest request of new staffing positions. And there are many more staffing positions and enhancements and items included in our strategic plan. But I think it's fair to say that the administration and Superintendent Bernard and myself, in our preparation of recommending a budget to the school committee, as we tried to find that balance between what the community can afford and what would be the key, priority positions to enhance programs and move the district forward. And as you can see in the strategy areas I talked about earlier in that NRPS 2021 document, these positions certainly focus on the student support service strategy, as well as teaching and learning. We were able to address in prior budgets the technology integration strategy area and add some digital learning specialists and so forth over the last few years. So what you see here in our FY19 budget is more of a focus on student support services. And these are listed in priority order by the administration in our request to the school committee. And you can see the school adjustment counselor at the high school. Currently there's only one full-time school adjustment counselor serving over 800 students at the high school. We feel this position is certainly extremely important to short-term and ongoing counseling services to students who are struggling with social, emotional, and behavioral problems. The second item, the next four items, believe it or not, four positions, I should say, were all positions that were requested last year in fiscal 2018, but unfortunately, due to the revenue plan and budget constraints, were all positions that ultimately were not funded. But the administration still sees these as a priority, and that's why you see them being requested again for consideration for fiscal 2019. The special education elementary team chairperson is a position that would work at all three elementary schools, across the district, and provide additional support to elementary students with special needs, and certainly allow for more enhanced development of our in-house special education programs and supports that will all help better meet the needs of students. The Batchelor Elementary School, there's a 0.4 request for a school psychologist. The Batchelor Elementary School is the largest elementary school amongst the three, and they certainly serve the largest population of elementary students, and we feel this position is necessary to allow students to have the supports necessary to be fully engaged and have access to the general education classroom. The academic teacher at the high school, that is a position we've been trying to get for a few years. when we look at the class sizes, and I'll show you a chart in a moment of the class sizes at the high school, this position will certainly allow the high school, particularly in the mathematics and science curriculum areas, to achieve optimum class sizes or get closer to those optimum class sizes that we're looking towards. So it's certainly a priority position. In the last position, the 0.5 reading teacher at the little school, we feel will allow the little school in particular to more fully implement response to intervention strategies and allow the school to intervene immediately for students who may be struggling. This will assist the little school in providing the support necessary to students to meet the needs of students at all grade levels. So those are the new positions. It was 3.9 FTE. A quick snapshot about the high school core academic class sizes. So you can see the need for that position as we look at some of these class sizes. So the horizontal bar graph, it represents the number of students, and the vertical is the number of classes. So we certainly try to achieve class sizes 24 or below, and we certainly have a large number of class sizes that are above that at the high school level. Having that additional position will certainly address this need, and it's certainly a top priority as we look towards fiscal 2019. We look at the larger picture of the request that's on the table for fiscal 2019. The operating general fund requests is $31,198,533. As I said earlier, that represents a little bit more than a $1.5 million increase over fiscal 2018, and is actually a 5.3% increase. That doesn't tell the full picture or the full story, so we actually have our grants and our revolving accounts for our programs that we do assess either a user fee or a tuition for, as well as the federal and state grants that we do receive, account for pretty close to another $2.7 million. So when you add the two sources of funding together, we're actually looking at a total school budget, the school funds of a little more than $33.8 million, and that's a change of almost $1.5 million over fiscal 2018. And even that doesn't tell the full picture of what goes into making the North Reading educational experience is what it is. The school committee accepts a variety of donations on an ongoing basis at each meeting throughout the school year. On average, those total $250,000, and those can be anywhere from our parent groups, from our booster groups, from private donors, from local businesses, and it's just an incredible amount of support that we have come to count on, and appreciate that. We're extremely appreciative of all the donations that we do receive. And then on top of those donations, the parent associations and organizations and PTO groups also help support enrichment programs, teacher supply reimbursements, a lot of other activities at the school that their ongoing annual budgets of in-kind donations total close to $75,000. So that a lot goes into making the North Reading educational experience what it is today. So this is just a quick snapshot of a bar graph that shows you a little bit of the changes over the last 8 or 9 years of those school revenue offsets. So as you can just see, we're projecting a slight decline in fiscal 2019 over 18. Most of that decline is a result of that circuit breaker special education reimbursement amount going down as a result of the state not fully funding that program. That can be contributed to the reason for the reduction next year. But we've certainly worked hard to try to keep these amounts as stable as we can, not to have a situation where we have a large amount of revenue being lost in any given fiscal year, which puts an additional burden, a challenge for the appropriation or the general fund budget. But we've had increased some user fees. We tried to avoid doing that over the last few years. But for the most part, we're working hard at keeping these amounts stable. quick snapshot of the operating budget, what the historical percent that have been funded by the town's appropriation. As you can see, the request next year is for 5.3%, and we are hoping to, the previous 2 years, it was a little bit less than that, at 3.8%. So we're hoping that the 5.3% budget gets supported. It might be a little bit higher than what the 12-year average is, which is slightly under 4%. But it's certainly a need, given certainly the challenges and what's at play here, and the budget drivers, and a lot of the fixed costs and those expenses that are sort of out of our control that we're dealing with at the school level. So when we started this process, we actually developed 3 initial budget proposals. One was which would be known as a level services budget, and that's essentially level staffing, or look at what we kind of have today and ensure that we'll have that next year. It's adjustments for our fixed cost increases, our contractual salary obligations, and changes to enrollment, which we know were not necessary for staffing for next year. But to achieve that budget based on the contractual obligations and the operational costs, and to fund the out-of-district special education changes, would have required a budget of 4.4% increase. The recommended budget, which was the budget we presented to the school committee in March, and that I'm going over today, again, is that 5.3% increase. And then what we're also have shared with the school committee and the staff is what a full requested budget is. So that what that would mean is all the requests from the principals, as well as all the staffing positions that are in our strategic plan. If we were to try to fund everything, we would actually need a budget that's 8.3% higher. And some of those additional staffing positions that are not reflected in the recommended budget, although they're in our strategic plan, are shown here. So ideally, we would like an additional 10.5 FTE positions to achieve, to fully fund the strategic plan. I won't go through these entirely, but as you can see, most of these positions certainly involve expanding the foreign language program, adding positions to enhance our social and emotional academic support programs, continuing to enhance our digital learning model and technology integration into the classroom, adding some administrative support to assist with the elementary curriculum leadership model, and addressing the need for additional supervision and evaluation support. So there's certainly a lot of other need out there that is reflected in our strategic plan. And then this final chart, just kind of operationally, other positions we feel we do need would be these 3 positions here. Would be a school nurse, a district-wide school nurse that may focus on the secondary level to better bring those ratios of nurse to student back within optimum levels. And then certainly on the building and grounds department, we do feel these 2 positions, are in need and they are warranted. Certainly the middle school and the high school campus, the beautiful state-of-the-art, school campus, has certainly brought some highly technical systems to the district that have been managing and learning more about on an ongoing basis. But the lighting controls, the heating and cooling controls, all certainly the energy management system. We feel having an engineer on staff would be immensely helpful. And then just the square footage alone and makeup of this campus, as well as all the schools, certainly warrant another kind of maintenance grounds position as well. So these are the positions, again, not reflected in the 5.3%, but we feel certainly there's a need out there for these as well. I won't spend a lot of time talking about this. I'll hopefully get to your questions in a moment. About almost 30 minutes in, so I wanted to leave at least 25, 30 minutes for questions. But this is a question I get often by some parents and by members of the community about those programs that you do. Unfortunately, we do, like many other districts across the Commonwealth, have to assess a tuition cost for, or a user fee what are you collecting on an annual basis? And then when you look at those direct costs, what percent of that user fee you're collecting, how much of that are you supporting? So this breaks down that scenario. As you can see, in most cases, we're right at about 50% of the amount that we're collecting from a user fee or a tuition, helping support that 50% cost. In the aggregate, we're just under that 50% ratio. And then kind of in summary here, what does the FY19 budget accomplish? And what can we conclude from our recommended budget? I think it's fair to say it's not really a fancy or a complicated budget, but it does work to achieve some key initiatives. Number one, it allows us to meet our contractual obligations with staff. We are negotiating with the Teachers Association, North Reading Teachers Association, so it does include a salary pool for those negotiations. It does include some additional staffing, again, guided by our strategic plan to improve class sizes for enhanced teaching and learning, mainly at the high school. Continuation of special education programs to meet the needs of students. Helps address the social and emotional learning needs of students by the school adjustment counselor, the school psychologist increase. Helps increase academic support needs to identified students. Again, the 0.5 reading teacher at the little would help address that initiative. Helps address costs to properly operate and maintain not only the middle school, high school campus, but the 3 elementary schools. And then seeks to meet the needs of all students, in particular the district's high need student population. And the recommended budget would also restore instructional expense budgets at each school. So that is sort of the presentation. These are a look at key next steps in the process. The next date is April 9th, which is the public hearing. That's a week from Monday, taking place at 6:30 p.m. in the Distance Learning Lab at the middle school, high school. School committee is set to make a formal vote on April 30th, and you have town meeting is on June 4th. So with that being said, I'm going to attempt to see what kind of questions, if anything, any questions that may be coming in. So I'm actually going to try to scroll through the questions that came in through the chat mechanism, and then let me do that for a few moments. And then after that, if you do want me to unmute your line, if you indicate that by using the raise your hand feature, I'll attempt to unmute your line. Hopefully I can know how to do that, being new at it in the software, and then we can have a conversation as well. So I'm just going to roll through. I see in the first question here, there was a question that was asked about the salaries column. It looks like they're asking if that includes pension obligations and insurance. And so can you further elaborate on what the breakdown of increases are? Higher insurance costs, increased salaries. So the salary, it's a good question. And the salary amount represented in the school budget that was presented earlier, the $25,765,881, that is strictly salaries, base salaries, in some cases, all negotiated through, in most cases, collective bargaining agreements with our smaller bargaining units as well as the teachers. The insurance and the pension piece, that's actually funded on the town side. So in the town budget, we actually look at that as a fixed cost. So the cost for health insurance and retirement costs and so forth, that all is taken off the top as a fixed cost between the school and the town. But the cost for that necessarily is not housed within the general fund appropriation request of the $31,198,533 by the school department. So there's a lot of other costs that we looked at that is being funded by the town, and that's the pensions and the insurance costs is on the kind of the town side of the equation. I hope that answers that question put in by Kerry, it looks like. Other question coming in, with respects to fees for sports, clubs, etc., is there any financial assistance offered to lower income students? It's a great question, and the answer to that is yes, there is. So in most cases, students that do qualify for either free or reduced lunch when they fill out their free and reduced lunch application, if they indicate that they're allowing the district to kind of share that financial income information with other programs, we do offer either a full waiver or a partial waiver for those families that qualify. And that is the case consistently throughout all of those programs, certainly the bus program, the athletic program, the extracurricular student club program, and the in some cases the kindergarten and preschool tuition program. So it is something that is available and is offered. Next question I'm seeing, historically, does the town approve the requested annual increase? If not, what is the expected reduction? Are you considered asking for the full 8%? A great question. And if you, so if you look at, it actually might be helpful if I go back a few slides to address that question. If I can, because I think if I pull up the historical operating budget requests, that this chart here. So as you can see, historically, what we've recommended to the community and to the school committee for support has always historically been slightly higher than what ultimately gets funded. So I believe if you even look at the last couple of years, what we had in our recommended preliminary budget phase, which is kind of the phase we're in now, we were recommending budgets closer to 4.8, 5, or 5.3%. And as you can see, when the budget that was appropriated last year and the year before that was funded less than that at 3.8%. So I think it's fair to say that we think we'll have to make some difficult decisions in the coming weeks. We're waiting for a more accurate number from the finance planning team and from the board of selectmen with the town. That's actually why we delayed our budget workshop, which was supposed to occur last week. It's now occurring next week on April 4th. There's a finance planning team on April 3rd and next week, and we hope to get a more concrete or updated revenue number in the revenue plan. The town is certainly wrestling with a few different variables that make up that revenue plan. The largest right now on the fixed cost side of the equation is the health insurance increase, as well as some other assumptions that are guiding their revenue plan. So we hope that next week we'll have more information, and we hope that some of the initial challenges that we're seeing right now, that a potential budget gap for up to $1 million or so to fund level services, a little bit more than that, $1.2 million, as you see in that next step slide, will be considerably reduced. That's the hope right now. But that being said, I think we do expect that the 5.3% but amount will be a challenge for the town to fully fund or appropriate, and we think we'll be faced with some decisions on that, which is not unlike prior budget years. And your final point of your question is, have you considered asking for the full 8% budget that would fully request that? And I think that is something the school committee has wrestled with, or certainly I think we'll probably have conversations more with the school committee on some of those other positions or the other needs that have been identified in the full requested budget. It's particularly guided by the NRPS 2021 document. I think from the administration standpoint, and certainly the budget subcommittee, which are two members of the school committee that myself and Mr. Bernard meet with throughout the budget development process, in putting together the 5.3% request, is we were trying to find that balance between what the funding challenges are and what the community can afford, and still moving things forward in achieving some key positions in that strategic plan to enhance programs and accomplish some key initiatives. I don't know if Mr. Bernard has something to add to that.
I think one of the advantages we got with our finance planning team and meeting so regularly when the budget development process starts usually very early in the fall is we come into this process with the recognition that the town, the municipal side of government, also has needs and has challenges to fund all of their needs as well. So because of the kind of the cooperative nature of the budget development, as Mr. Conley said, the 5.3% increase is one that we have committed as viewing as being reasonable in recognition of what and so we recommend a budget that we feel is not strikes a balance and is not something that we can use just a wish list. We use the wish list process with the development of our strategic plan, which is available on the district website. And as Michael said, it's a 5-year plan. So while certainly we would never refuse funding if it came our way, I think one of the things that we enjoy in North Reading is the fact that there's a cooperative spirit to try to balance what the affordability of the town is, and consequently then what the school district can afford. At the same time, also making sure that for the school department side that the academic program for all students is as strong as it can be. And I think when you look at the proposed increase to the recommended budget with the 3.9 full-time equivalent positions that Mr. Conley went through, we believe that those are enhancements, but they're not the full enhancements, and that would be, something that we, right now, given what the financial picture is for the town, is not something that is even close to being affordable.
Great, thank you, Mr. Bernard. So I see another question coming in here about the pie chart and what the difference is between fees and receipts in the smallest slices of what's making up the funding mechanism of. So I'm actually going to try to go to that slide. That's the questions being asked about. You just bear with me for a moment. So I believe this was the slide that the person asking the question is referring to. And the main difference here is the local receipts. Those are receipts that flow into the town. So those are. Then the revenue plan is made up of certainly local property taxes, which is the largest piece of the pie. It's also made up of state aid. That's the Chapter 70 educational aid formula, as well as the unrestricted government local aid. And then it's also made up of local receipts, and those could be other receipts that the town receives, like for licenses, for permits, the trash fee. Those are considered local receipts, which flow in directly to the town. So that's what that 9.3% is made up of. And then the other smaller piece of the pie, the fees and the grants, those are the user fees and the tuitions that flow directly into the school department budget and get posted in revolving accounts. And that's the difference between those two pieces of the pie. The local receipts are more on the town side. They receive receipts for permits and licenses, fees, and then trash fee. Those are the three big ones. And then the brown piece of the pie here, the fees and the grants, those flow into either grant accounts or revolving accounts. And those are fees that are controlled by the school committee, and that's the athletic user fee, the extracurricular student activity club fee, and the full day preschool kindergarten tuitions, and the busing fee. So that's that 2.7 million amount that I talked about. We also received several federal and state grants. Again, that amount is relatively fixed. Most of those grants are entitlement grants. The largest grant is a special education grant, which helps offset the cost of our special education costs, mainly some staff and transportation and some of our contractual services to meet students' needs. So I hope that answered your question asked by Robert. All right, so I'm just going to try to flow through to see if there's any other questions coming in on the chat mechanism. I think we covered that one. Okay. So I don't think there's any more questions in the being asked for that I can see at the moment coming through through the question chat mechanism. I'm just going to scroll through to see if there's anyone that wants me to unmute their line. To do so, I think you have to just kind of raise your hand, and then I kind of see that you have a question, and then I'll unmute your line, and then we will actually be able to hear you if you wanted to ask a direct question. If not, that's fine too, and I'll just kind of wrap up here. We are getting close. It's about kind of. Yeah, so I don't see any questions coming in at the moment. So I'm actually going to go to that last slide that I kind of went through pretty pretty quickly. It was the next step slide. So some of the key dates coming forward is, again, the school committee budget workshop. Actually, this actually was delayed till April 4th. So it was originally going to happen on March 22nd, but it's now actually happening next Wednesday on April 4th. As you can see, we're doing the webinar today, which is we actually moved it to March 29th, not to impact Good Friday. And then the public hearing is the next key date, and that is a week from Monday night at 6:30 p.m. in the Distance Learning Lab. There'll be, I think, most of the administrators and principals and central office administrators will be present at that meeting. And the presentation, believe it or not, is probably going to be very similar to what you heard today in terms of the 20-25-minute opening presentation and the slides. But there'll be a lot of other opportunity to ask questions and actually hear from the school committee and see what, where the school committee stands on some of these, challenges and priorities that we've been presenting for fiscal 2019. So I think those are the key dates. School committee is, again, not set to officially vote their budget on April 30th. And then again, town meeting is on June 4th. So I'm just going to see if there's any more questions. I don't see anyone raising the hand indicating there's a question. I'm just going to go to all right, so I see a question being asked here. So the question is, I've heard that we are losing a kindergarten teacher at the little school, and why? So essentially the enrollment at the full day kindergarten is actually going down. Projected enrollment at the kindergarten level, or the registrations that came into for the full day kindergarten program is down next in fiscal 2019 as compared to this year. And I think that was something we actually anticipated when we looked at some of the town census data. And at the moment, there's only about 20 or so students registered for full day kindergarten at the little school. So they just didn't warrant 2 full day kindergarten sections at the little school. So the enrollment at the 2 other schools, the Batchelor Elementary School and the Hood Elementary School, did warrant additional sections. So the number of full day kindergarten sections is actually staying the same. We have 7 full day kindergarten sections this year. We anticipate we're projecting, and the budget includes 7 next year. The difference is just where those students fell based on the census and the students that have registered for full day kindergarten. And there were more students registered at the Batchelor Elementary School, which would run 3 sections, the Hood Elementary School, which would run 3 sections, and the Little, because of the low enrollment this year, would run the 1 section. So there was overall, when you look at the full day kindergarten program amongst all 3 schools, there was actually no staffing reductions. It was the same. It was just where those sections landed based on the breakdown and the makeup of those students that registered and indicated they wanted full day kindergarten. So that's certainly something that the administration always works and takes a close look at. It tends to be very fluid, as more students enroll and suggest changes. So it's something that we do monitor throughout the budget process and throughout the school year. But our goal has been in recent years we always want to provide full day kindergarten for every family that desires such. And that was a goal that we started really focusing on 2 or 3 years ago, and it's certainly a focus next year. And then because the numbers don't always quite work out, unfortunately, it's never quite kind of a neat situation amongst the 3 schools. We always try to minimize any impact of families may happen to go to a full day kindergarten program outside their home district. So that's what we try to do as an administration each year, and that's the process we went through this year as well. So I hope that answers your question. I think that one question being asked about again about the enrollment at the kindergarten at the schools. Has the town ever considered, excuse me, I'm just going to try to expand the question. Has the town ever considered having schools based on grades? So I don't know. I mean, it's a,
Is that, I think I understand the question. Like an early in one of our elementary schools, and that school might be, say, this is
yeah.
that has come up in conversation over the years. I think one of the significant challenges is kind of the redistricting and what that does for families across the town. In my experience here as a superintendent for 4 years, there has not been, I would say, any in-depth conversation around that.
Okay. Another question coming in about the bus cost. The bus cost is going up. Are we being charged more this year? So that there's not a proposal on the table or consideration right now to increase any of the user fees in fiscal year 2019 as not part of our recommended budget. And it's something that we certainly don't want to do. So we're trying to absorb that increase without having to assess a user fee increase. As those families are well aware, we had to, about 2 years ago, we experienced an increase in bus rates, and we did increase that user fee and family cap. We don't want to have to do that again. So even though there's a slight increase again for next year, based on the contract, there's not currently on a proposal to increase bus user fee, both for an individual pass or the family cap as well. We're hoping to keep all user fees the same. Hope that answers that question. All right, so we're getting to. I don't see any more. I think I've addressed all the questions. Scrolling through, and I'll just one more time before I maybe conclude here. Just go back to see if anyone's raising their hand. I don't see as if anyone's raising their hand. And at the moment, I don't see any more questions coming in. So that being said, I really appreciate the interest in the webinar. I think it certainly was new to us, and I hope everyone that participated today found it helpful and informative and an easy way to get access to some information and questions answered, as we fully appreciate the challenges with families and so forth to get out to meetings around dinner time or after dinner into the evening. So hopefully this was helpful and something that we'll look to do more of in the future. Very good. With that being said, I hope everyone has a great Easter and has a good day. Thank you very much. Great. Okay. Great.